scriptures bring us understanding and enrich our lives. Amen. Please welcome Reverend Patrick Mahone to our pulpit.
Well, thank you. First, I have to apologize. I asked my wife, who is a dear and sweet and accurate lady, do we have enough ink in the printer so I can print out my sermon tomorrow? She says, absolutely. If you only want the last page, she's right. So, it's going to be interesting because I have new glasses with progressive lenses and I have not figured them out yet. And I have a computer that I'm not sure how it's going to work with all this stuff up here, but it's either that or I'm going to make the sermon up as I go along. So, I also read that a good Baptist pastor always begins with a joke. And since I'm up here with a computer that I don't really want to work with, and I'm new to you guys, and I'm nervous, and you're probably nervous, thinking, what is he going to do? I'm going to tell you a good joke. It does not refer to my wife, but one Sunday, in the front row right over here was a Yankee farmer with his bib overalls on. You know how you hook your fingers, your thumb through the straps? He's sitting there. The minister comes up, and all of a sudden there's a puff of smoke, a blinding flash of light, the smell of sulfur and brimstone, and as the smoke clears, there's a 9-foot character in a red suit with those horns and the tail and the pitchfork. Everybody in the whole church jumps up, runs out the door screaming, except that old Yankee farmer. The devil says, do you know who I am? Yankee farmer says, yep. Do you know what I could do to you? Yep. Aren't you afraid of me? Nope. Why aren't you afraid of me? Guy looks at the devil and says, lived with your sister for 40 years. That's not my wife, but for what it's worth. All right, so I titled this Living the Good Life because, frankly, I've said it. I said when I retire, I want to live the good life. And I'm sure you've heard it or said it yourself. But what exactly, from a Christian perspective, is the good life that we want to live? For some of us, and I'm sure everyone has different opinions, some of us want a beach house on the Cape. Be able to look out, have your own beach, the waves coming in. Others, perhaps a cabin in the woods by a burbling little forest stream. Some of you might want to have a life that's every day is golfing on the eternal fairways. I think we're all different. But living the good life is really an interesting thing because I knew what I wanted to do when I retired. I was going to read lots of theology books, lots of murder, mystery, suspense books, a lot of history books. I was also going to travel. My plan was to fly to Norway with our bicycles and ride our way to Italy. I retired in the summer of 2019, and by early February, my dream of taking off to Norway that summer coming up, 2020, kind of died a different death than I expected. Why? Because of COVID. Instead, COVID taught me something else. By the way, can you all hear me with this? I don't want anyone falling asleep, so if you can't hear me, raise your hand. All right, so I thought that I was going to have to find a new way of living, and I did. I watched 8 million YouTube videos, murder mystery videos, history videos, all kinds of videos. I read some books, but really what became a good life was simply having life, that I didn't get COVID, that my wife didn't get COVID, that none of my close relatives got COVID. Simply being alive was my only real goal, to live a good life. As time passed, I found different things to do. I volunteered to work with Afghan men and women who had just arrived in country. That fun way of learning to do a different kind of living the good life, because they saw me as knowledgeable about everything. If they had a letter from some government agency, I was expected to understand it. I don't understand anything from a government agency, and here I am telling these guys what to do. You don't know me, but I ended up having to teach these men how to shop at a supermarket. That was comical. My wife, I think, is still laughing over the idea that I could teach anybody how to shop in a supermarket. But I did. I also had to do all kinds of things, like they would say, is this food halal or is this food haram? Halal food you can eat if you're Islamic, Muslim. Haram, you can't eat it. Well, I am extensively trained in how to know the difference between haram and halal food, but they wanted to know, and they couldn't read English, so I had to help. It was a lot of fun. It really made me feel alive in a way that I hadn't felt in a long time. They also had me do some strange things, which were kind of comical. They were given 6 months gift certificates to the YMCA in Hoyle. I had to explain to them that when they went swimming, Islamic dress rules did not apply, and that American women probably were going to show a little bit more skin than they were kind of used to, and that they could not get upset and they could not make any comments. They just had to sort of smile and grin and bear it. It was a fun time. It was a real interesting time. I also, on this very street out here, on my first person, I had to teach about 10 of them how to drive. I also went through at least 10 stop signs and most of the stoplights out here in front of this church, because they'd never seen a stoplight, heard about a stoplight. They saw no point in reading signs and painted on the roads. Never. Then I was again almost back to saying, God, I just want to live. Because there's nothing more fun than going through a red light and having your Afghan driver, when you explain the error of your ways, then he just laughs and says, but we did not to get hit. True, he's right. I only had 3 small accidents totaling only roughly $6,000 something from my insurance company. But it was a good life. But those are things that I found to be good life. What does Paul say? In the Ephesians, he says the good life, he doesn't quite call it that, but leading a good life, it's not just reading great books. It's not just helping people. It's not just laying on the beach. It's not just relaxing in the forest or playing golf. He says we should live a life worthy of the calling to which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, making every effort to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. Every single one of us here is called to that life, to live that life. That is essentially how you live a Christian life. He says you have been called. Every one of us is called to something. Hopefully, we paid attention to it. Tom is sitting over there in the corner smirking because he's not giving the sermon, I am. But he's called to be a minister. I felt I was called to be a minister. And there's some checks and balances. But each and every one of you, too, has a calling. It might be different at different times. I felt called to help the Afghans. I didn't have to. And there were days I really didn't want to. But it's a calling. And the calling that we have is we're called to live a good life. We're called to live it as followers of Jesus Christ. Now, Paul talks about faith a lot. And we have a lot of hymns that talk about faith. And we have a lot of books and articles on faith. And faith is important, and I'll talk more on that in a second. But as followers, we really have to do something about how we live our faith. There's a life that we can easily do, it's just following our base instincts. You know how it is, and I've had this happen, sadly. One day I was driving home, and this guy cut me off. I cut him off, that's the truth. I cut him off. And he honked, gave me a couple of hand signs. And then at the next intersection, he cut me off. Oh, it was delicious. I honked. I flashed my lights. I grimaced. I didn't give him any hand signs. What a great life that was. That's living the good life. Revenge in less than 5 minutes. You know what? How is that patience? Where is the humility? That's not what we're called to do. It may feel good, but it's not what God really wants. Now, faith means we have to have faith, because we can't just trust to follow our base instincts. Our base instincts, I swear, is when we see a stranger dressed differently, odd, acting, you tend to want to stay away. I don't know if it's survival from caveman days, because I can imagine sitting around a campfire and you see some strange guy coming and you're in your caveman suit, and you go, well, he's probably here to offer us chicken from his farm or something. And he comes and whacks you over the head. So maybe humans have been trained to be suspicious. I don't know. But as Christians, we're called to resist those kind of things. We do it by having love. We have a spirit of gentleness, a spirit of patience, a spirit of humility. Have you ever met somebody from another church who says, well, you don't really go to a real church like I do? I've met them. That's not very humble. We're all there. We're all trying. Faith is important because it's how we build things. How we live our life is a result of faith. And there's a whole lot of things that help us. This is very frustrating. The worst thing for me is I put these down and then I spend an hour looking for them when I need them. But if we need to get revenge, if we need to put people down, if we need to fight every fight just because we want to win, we are not living the good life. We're not living our faith. We're not living in gentleness or unity. I have been in a church a long time. I don't know when I first returned back to them, but I remember there was a minister that our church got rid of. And the saddest thing about it was the two groups were so separated and so sure that they were right. They were so sure. This is a problem. I just switched to the last hymn. They were so sure they were right. There's no humility, no patience. The only thing they could agree on is not only did they want the minister to stay, they wanted the other group to go. And the other group wanted the minister to go and the other group to go. It was a brutal, horrible time. And I swore I would do everything in my power to never do that again. Do you remember in grammar school, maybe high school, you had 2 grades on your report cards? Anybody remember that? You had the test grade and you had the effort grade. Anybody? Oh, good. I usually scored really good in effort because I tricked the teachers. They thought I was trying. I was a very stubborn child. And if I didn't see any point in learning French, for example, I just didn't. But I tried so hard. I would usually get like C minus, D minus, maybe something else that I want to say out loud. But I usually got like a B minus in effort. I think, unlike school, where you get promoted by your test score, I think God asks us to try. I think that if there's a score in your thing of C minus in civil behavior, but you're trying your hardest, A plus, I think God says, that's good work. So it's not an unachievable goal that we can be patient, that we can be human, humble, that we can be gentle. In God's eyes, our efforts count. Now think of this. You may be saying, yeah, but you got to really have faith. Well, you know, faith without trying is not right. Do you remember the 60s? And you remember the late 50s and 60s? They had segregation in the South. I've been to the South. My uncle died down there, and every yard had a sign in it saying, Jesus saves, go to this church. It was all over town. Religious people. forget, that town is named after Jeb Stuart, a Confederate general. The highway is the Jeb Stuart Highway. The ambulance is the Jeb Stuart ambulance. The town square has a statue like 10 feet tall of a Confederate soldier with the title Our Heroes. And in the Hall of Heroes in the county building, there's all the men from World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and in the middle is a color lithograph of General Stuart. These men that made these rules a long time ago, I am sure went to one of the 40 churches in town. I'm sure their faith was deep and powerful, but it wasn't lived faith. Because you can't live faith and discriminate against people like that. You ever been to New York City? Everyone seen New York? Okay. New York City is a big, important city for two reasons. One, it's got a beautiful harbor, but it's not a lot of land. Manhattan is just a tiny island. Imagine if there was no bedrock under that city. See, remember the Leaning Tower of Pisa? They built it, you go, it's not on bedrock. Our faith is the bedrock of how we can live this life, because it's built on solid rock that doesn't shift, that doesn't break. It holds our ability to be humble, to be patient, to be loving, to be kind. Every one of us can do it, because we are called to be people who really live a life worthy of the calling that we have been called to. We have free will. We can say, no, I don't want to do this. But God's love is constant and always coming back. I always think of it like when I was a little kid, there was a lot of people collected these stones out of like the Westfield River. They would be like anvil shaped because the water wore them down. You ever see those? Good. You guys are great, because some churches, when I preach, they just look at me and like, I'm not going to tell you the answer. The fact is, that's how God's love is. It wears us down sometimes. We try to resist, but eventually God wins. Everybody has these problems. Every church has people in it that we are struggling to be faithful people. God's love and our faith will help us. Humility, gentleness, patience, and unity. These are tough things to do sometimes, and for some of us, but we can improve our lives because these traits are critical when they're easily done, when they're built on that bedrock of faith that allows us to live a life that is really the good life. Amen. So now we are going to try to do communion out of my book, which I'm not sure how